Hello again, everybody. As always, Who Day. It was a good day for the Bengals if you only watched the first quarter and a half of the game. Then after that, it took a quick turn. I've got my usual cast here with me, Tanya O'Rourke and Reggie Wilson. We talked a little bit. What'd you say, Tanya?
I said Reggie O. Wilson.
Reggie O. Wilson. Sorry about that, Reggie. Stuck. Yeah. we talked a little bit before we hopped on here to record this podcast today about Tanya's alma mater, Tennessee, and we got her pretty fired up about it. We won't talk about that. We're just going to get her fired up on the Bengals now because Tanya, what happened? What happened on Sunday?
I don't know. I'm watching the first part of the game, and they look like, wow, this is what we're going to be. Maybe not this year, maybe not every game, but this is what we're going to be. This is the future. This is, oh my God, we've got this group, 21-0. Oh my Lord. I was with a couple people who were it was a 1-year-old birthday party, and they're like, yes, the Bengals are back. I said, don't you dare jinx us. Went home, immediately fell asleep didn't mean to, but like laid down watching the game, fell asleep, woke up, we were losing. And I was like, welcome back to Bengal Land. And here we are. And then I watched the rest of the game, and I thought, I tweeted it out. I said, this feels familiar. Whether it's Andy Dalton or it's, the greatest man since sliced cheese was invented, Joe Burrow, we're going to throw a pick for the last play of the game.
And you called it.
That's my breakdown.
There you go. See, we intentionally didn't talk about the Bengals game with Tanya before the podcast actually started here because I wanted to hear the raw emotions. Reggie, you covered the game as usual on Sunday night. As I normally ask you, what's it like trying to break that game down? Because it was really two different games. It was like there was one game for the first quarter and a half, and then there was a totally different game for the next 2.5 quarters.
It was like, where do you start, right? It's like it was interesting. They scored touchdowns on their first 3 drives, and it was just like, who is this team? Like, they're about to blow Indianapolis out. And then all of a sudden it slowed down a little bit, and it was like, oh shoot. And then they started to score. Indy started to score and score a couple times. And I think I even tweeted, I was like, oh yeah, this is setting up for Heartbreak City, isn't it? And sure enough, I didn't expect that Burrow would be the guy to, just gut everybody like that. But, he's a rookie. You got to take some lumps. You take the good with the bad with them. But those are the kind of mistakes, especially in crunch time, that you just don't expect from him, especially being that, in these last 2-minute drives, he tends to make the right decisions. And he had it cooking with A.J. Green. I had visions of a Burrow to A.J. Green fade in the back of the end zone to game the Colts, and it just was not to be. And that was tough to stomach.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Reggie. I kept thinking, maybe this is going to happen. Maybe, because A.J. Green had a good game. And I'm thinking, all right, here we go. Or to Tate, or I don't care. It was going to be a golden moment. We were going to rise above. We did.
Well, what happened? And that's my real question is what happened? Because, like I said, if you turn the TV off mid-second quarter, you're thinking, all right, we locked in the win early in this game, baby. We were playing from ahead. And Reggie tweeted earlier in the game and was like, let's see how the Bengals do playing from ahead.
Yeah.
Clearly it didn't go well. What happened though, Reggie?
I think so. Mixon getting hurt didn't help, but he did come back in the game. So, if he's available, then you play him, and, he played and he still looked like he was effective. But I still go back to play calling. I feel like with Zach Taylor, I've said this many a times, he's a great guy, nice guy, but he's still feeling his way around as a play caller. And I think, he's so used to calling plays to help bring them back from being behind. I don't think he has very much experience calling a game that keeps them ahead. And I think what happened was a classic case of, they ran out of juice. I think the play calls got a little stale, and the offense got a little stagnant, and the defense was like, okay, guys, can you guys stay on the field for a little bit longer, because we're getting waxed out here. And
Do you think it was do you think it got too conservative too early?
I think so. And especially being that after the game, Jesse Bates, he was like, look, man, if we scored 21 points, that should be enough to win it for us. And it's like, is it enough? Like, is that the thought process that if you score 21 points, then that should be enough to win you a football game? Because if that's the mentality, then that ain't it. Because the defense is not playing well enough to keep 21 points on the board and have that be enough.
It had the classic feel of a game where the Bengals went up. I mean, they went up 21-0 early in the game. Then they got outscored from that point forward 31-6.
Yeah, they only scored 6 more points after, racing out to that 3-score lead. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, got the early turnover, scored an early touchdown, and you're feeling good at that point because you're like, we scored an early touchdown. They ended up scoring 3 touchdowns. You're thinking we get the ball first after half. That's huge. And the Bengals are dominating the line of scrimmage early in the game, which was shocking in itself, even if you don't even have the scoreboard up on your screen to show you that the Bengals are up 21-0. You're thinking we are dominating the line of scrimmage, which is weird. Mm-hmm. That hasn't happened in a while to where they truly were dominating the line of scrimmage. But here we are. And, things are looking good. But then it fell apart. One positive, though, T. Higgins has his first 100-yard receiving game. He had 125 yards receiving on 6 catches, 8 targets. But the leading receiver in terms of targets in Sunday's game was none other than A.J. Green. 8 catches for just 4 yards shy of 100 yards receiving. 8 catches, 96 yards. Did not score, but a good game for A.J. Green. And that may be the first time we've said that this season. He looked like a different A.J. Green Sunday. There were maybe a few plays that he should have made that he didn't, specifically the long ball down the sideline. But all in all, A.J. Green looked like a different guy, Tanya.
I think so. And I thought that, this was an important game for him because, we've been kind of rough on A.J. Green the last couple of weeks, maybe rightfully so. But I started thinking about it from putting myself in his shoes and what injury feels like to a guy like that. And not getting to play feels like to a guy like that. And certainly not getting to win. And I thought, if a guy like that loses confidence, what does that look like? What does that feel like? And it can't be good. And so to have a game where he did well and looked pretty darn good and started to look like A.J. Green again, I started to think, good for him. He is a good man. He's had a run of bad luck here over the last, almost 2 years now. And, I'd love to see A.J. Green be the productive guy that he has been and to have him be happy. A couple of seasons ago, there was a point where he said something he wishes he said they wish he hadn't. And then this past week we had questions about, was he saying trade me? And I just think, to have a game where he couldn't hang his hat on that one and go, okay, all right, I'm doing better now. I think that's an important move for him. I think it was an important game for him. And I'd like to see him keep building on that because I think at the end of the day, I'm an A.J. Green fan. I mean, I want him to do well and I want the Bengals to do well.
So as a Bengals fan, you're back on the train now. Where because there were a lot of fans last week, on the train of, hey, if he wants to be traded, trade the man.
No, I still feel that way. If he wants to be traded, get out. But my point is, I prefer he stay, and I prefer he be a productive member of this team, and because he's wonderful for this community. He's a good man, and he's so skilled. My preference is be A.J. Green, the A.J. Green we've always known. If short of that, and if you don't want to be here, get out. Because I don't want to work with people like where I work. I don't want to work with people who don't want to work and be number one or be successful. I don't want to root for a guy that's not going to do that either. But I think what I'm trying to say is I think maybe he was having a crisis of confidence that he needed to have a few great catches, to, put himself out there. Maybe he wasn't as 100%. Maybe he was afraid. And I'm hoping that this is a turning point for A.J. Green.
Okay, so when we get to the offseason and there's a bunch of conversation about, should we sign AJ Green to a long-term contract? No.
I'm going to know. I'm going to be a no.
If you're listening, you can't see us, because, this is not a video podcast. It's only audio, but Tanya's shaking her head right now. You're saying no.
I think T. Higgins has been a wonderful addition to this team. I think there's some bright spots on this team offensively. And as much as I love
long term, you don't see T. Higgins and AJ Green as complementary of each other. You see T. Higgins basically taking the place of AJ Green.
Well, we need somebody else. But I think AJ is done. I think he's kind of done here. And, sometimes people need a change of scenery. And I wouldn't be, if they were able to trade him and get something for him, I'd say do it.
And so what you're saying is you don't think he's necessarily done as a player, but he's done in Cincinnati.
I think he is. I think I'd love for him to stay, but if I wouldn't fight to keep him at this moment. Now, talk to me in a few games.
Yeah, and I'm putting you on the spot. It's still early in the season, still pretty early in the season. And it's Monday after he played a good game, and I'm putting you on the spot. Reggie, what's your thought on AJ Green right now?
He looked like the Adriel Jeremiah Green that we have come to know a little bit. And even to his own admittance, he wasn't all the way back as far as, just being aggressive out there. But he did say after the game that he felt like the old AJ Green. He felt like he was able to explode. He wasn't out there thinking too much about the hamstring, and he was just playing loose and enjoying himself out there. And that's great to see, and that's great to hear. Dave Lapham asked him, was it physical? Was it mental? And he was like, well, it was a lot physical, and then the physical was wearing on the mental, and that just caused his game not to look good at all. The deep ball that you referenced, Caleb, he said that he was disappointed in himself at his effort on that play. I think a lot of us were when we saw it. We were just like, usually he goes up and snags that. What was that? He kind of just short-armed it, just wanted the ball to come to him. And
it was a one-on-one 50-50 ball down the sideline where, he had every chance in the world to go high point that thing and didn't do it. It was a good pass, a good throw. It was a little underthrown by Joe Burrow, I think.
A little underthrown, but that was okay.
It was at least there. He had a chance to make that catch, yeah.
Exactly. What he said was he was trying to draw a PI, and it didn't happen. And so it just ended up looking back, because if you look at it, he pretty much just dropped it. It literally felt like he slowed down enough to where the ball fell in his hands, but he dropped it. But look, he wasn't the AJ Green that we know him to be, but I think for as much as he can be, he was AJ Green. Huge catches yesterday on some third downs, some key third downs. On that last drive that, Joe unfortunately threw the interception on, he had a huge catch on fourth down to extend the drive. It was almost vintage AJ. He was able to, look at, the last time he was in that building, he played phenomenally. So, it was good to see him playing well, but we, like Tanya said, we want to see some games being stacked on top of one another that he can actually show that, hey, I'm back. I'm AJ Green again. And maybe then we'll talk about, the contract situation.
Sure. We still got some time. And Tanya, I do apologize for putting you on the spot, but I think that it's things that a lot of Bengals fans are probably thinking about right now. And they've gone back and forth on the last few weeks, really the course of this season. Now, speaking of the season, it doesn't get any easier from here for the Bengals. That's for sure. They got the Browns this coming week. That is a home game, 2 straight home games. As a matter of fact, the Titans, who have looked really good this season, coming in the following week. Then a bye week, and then it's up to Pittsburgh. And we all know how good the Steelers have looked this season. So, I think we all hope that before the Bengals got into this stretch of the season, they'd have a few wins. Here we are, 1-4-1 this season. But what do the Bengals need to clean up specifically heading into this really a brutal stretch of the season? The Browns didn't look good yesterday, but they've looked good this season. So Browns, Titans, bye week, Steelers. Tanya, what needs to happen, heading into this rough stretch?
I don't know what doesn't need to happen. Tell me you guys are the experts. I'm just literally the person sitting there watching it and fell asleep, admittedly, during part of the game yesterday. But I thought we had it locked in. I closed my eyes for 1 second. What don't we need to do? I mean, I think maybe special teams, the only thing that I don't feel like needs a lot of work. Special teams seems to be doing quite fine, except I don't understand ever why you take a kick with your heels at the end zone. Why not just let it go? But
there was a 28-yard punt Sunday as well that Kevin Huber would probably not be proud of, but whatever.
That's true. That's true. I was talking like on the receiving side. Why would you catch a punt where your heels are on the end zone line? Like, just let it go. You're not going to get to the 25. You got to the 12 or something. I just think that is. I don't even know where to begin. I mean, look. Am I still super impressed with Joe Burrow? I am. I'm worried about him. I'm worried he's going to be, for lack of a better way of putting it, Bengalized. I saw Andy Dalton. That last play was an Andy Dalton play. Tell me it wasn't. Tell me it was not an Andy Dalton play. Reggie, tell me. Was it?
It kind of was.
It kind of was. And so I don't know. I think that this is a team that is probably reeling. I mean, we're seeing, reports out of the locker room where there's a lot of, teeth gnashing, and I don't like that ever on a team. That's just never a good sign. I don't know. I think the coaches, you got to wonder how long does this coaching staff get a pass? And they seem to be getting a big pass. And we know from experience that the Brown family is not fond of letting go coaches, certainly not midseason. They did it maybe a couple times, but they don't enjoy letting go coaches midseason. I'm not very sure where you would go at this point, and I'm not suggesting they should let go of coaches. I'm just saying you've got talent on this team. They should have won that game. They went up big in the first quarter and then essentially couldn't score the rest of the game. That's a problem. To me, it's a coaching problem.
And so you bring up a point that a lot of fans, I think, are talking about right now. I mean, if you get on Twitter, there are a lot of people, and I'm not asking you guys to jump on this train. I'm not asking even if it's the right thing to do or not from a fan perspective, but there are a lot of fans out there saying fire Zach Taylor right now on Twitter. I think personally, maybe it's early for that. It's way early for that. You've got a rookie quarterback still, and I mean, he will be a rookie quarterback all season. He had no preseason. There are going to be bumps in the road. I mean, let's be honest. And I'm not trying to be that typical, guy that's like, well, let's chalk it up to some excuse. He's a rookie or whatever. But my question to you guys would be, assuming we are still giving the coaching staff a pass for now, that, there is a rookie quarterback on the team that, Zach Taylor's only been there for a season and a quarter. How long does this pass last? If we're giving this pass to Zach Taylor now, how long does this pass last? Does it just last through the end of this season? Does it last through part of next season? Or does he get does he get all the way through next season before he's on the hot seat?
I think you got to see some type of improvement, because Coach Taylor's been so optimistic of a guy. And I mentioned this yesterday, but he's been super optimistic. He's been very slow to be critical of the team, the coaching staff especially. He won't call any of those guys out because those are his guys. And, I get that. That's fine. But I think the fan base is struggling to be confident in the product being put out there because there's been so much expectations set because of, there's some good bones on this team. And I think what you want to see is that you really want to see a team not lose a 21-point lead. Like, there are going to be a lot of games that, well, maybe not a lot of games, but there are going to be some games where you see them look like how they looked last week against Baltimore. It's like totally outmatched. But where you see progress was when you come out and you score 3 straight touchdowns to start a game. but then you can't sustain it. It's just like, yo, like the fans want to see some consistency and some good. We asked Joe Burrow yesterday, like, what is it going to take for you to feel confident that this thing is trending in the right direction? And he was just like, we want to win. We want to see some wins. And that was like all he said. He was kind of perturbed yesterday, which makes sense considering what happened. But I think through the end of this season, for one, Zach Taylor hasn't won a game on the road yet as head coach of the Bengals. That needs to change this season. And it'd be nice for them to string a couple wins together. I mean, we're not asking them to be, 12-4 or I guess 11-4-1 or whatever, but we do want to see some.
Making you do the math now because of that tie, making you do the tie math in your head.
I can't call him that. But no, I think, he made a point, Coach Taylor made a point. He said, we are what our record says that we are. And that's the truth. Like, they're not good based on what has happened.
But see, Reg, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think you're kind of making my point, which is, last year we sucked. It was ugly and awful. Doing this podcast every week was like stealing a part of my soul. This year, we were like, okay,
hopefully you feel better about the podcast today. Hopefully we're not stealing your soul today.
After mid-season, you're like, God, do I have to watch this game? I do. I have to do a podcast. But this year, we went into this knowing they were not going to be good. We were like, okay, that could be good. Maybe they'll win 4 or 5 games, but they're not going to be hideous. And I don't know that they're hideous, but winning matters. And you can't pull off a win with what you had yesterday. Whatever the game plan was in that first quarter, I think was an accident. I think they got lucky on a couple of calls. They got a good takeaway. I really do think they completely lucked into those 21 points. But they did execute and get them. So let's not take that away from them. But there's something, they're not getting better. And while we don't have as many losses at this point in the season, we also don't have a lot of wins. And so they have got to show me that they're getting better, or else at some point it does fall on the coaching staff. At some point you got to say, this is not okay.
Okay, so let me pose it to you this way. There are 10 games left for the Bengals this season. I'm going to read you off their opponents for the rest of the season just to kind of let that sink in real quick. And my question is going to be to you in advance. My question is going to be, what do we expect / hope for the Bengals record to be in the last 10 games? Forget about the 1-4-1 right now. If the season is 10 games long, because essentially Joe Burrow's played a little more than a preseason right now. 6 games, a little more than a preseason. If this is a 10-game schedule and it's the 10 games that are left, what is the Bengals record? All right, they got the Browns, the Titans, the Steelers, the football team, Washington football team, the Giants, the Dolphins, the Cowboys, Steelers again, the Texans, and the Ravens. What are we looking at?
2-8 if we're lucky.
Yeah,
2-8 if we're lucky, and that's is that expectation or is that hope?
I think that's expectation.
Yeah, I see maybe 2. I feel like I'm playing spades. I see 2 in the possible. I think they should be good enough to beat the football team.
I was gonna guess that you're saying if 2 in a possible, I'm gonna guess here and say wins over the football team and the Dolphins and a possible win over the Giants.
I give them the Giants and a possible win over the Dolphins. The Dolphins are much improved. I think the Dolphins to me look like what we were kind of expecting the Bengals to look like this year.
Rich, I think it's possible that they could beat the Browns at home.
Ooh.
That's possible. I see our producer Brian's face, and he's like, no. I say possible because if you watched that game yesterday, the Browns did not look that good.
We need like a fan cam on this podcast, by the way, where like it's audio only, but like every now and then we pop up a picture of like Brian's reaction to what we say, or maybe Tanya's reaction, like Tanya's SMH reaction, like shaking my head reaction.
Tanya, I'm not falling for that trap because they got obliterated by a conference opponent before, and then came out and kicked the snot out of the Bengals that next game on prime time. So I'm not falling for that. They got embarrassed by the Steelers on Sunday, and I think they're going to be angry. They don't have Nick Chubb, so that's cool. I guess.
hate that name anymore. Chubb.
But hey, they still have Kareem Hunt, who's a very high-level back in this league as well. They couldn't stop the run the last time. They did okay against the run yesterday. But the good thing is they'll have some fans. They'll be at home. But I just don't – that last time was like – I mean, Joe played well, but they were playing from behind pretty much like that whole game. And I'm cautious to give them much, especially after yesterday.
Behind her head, they're still struggling.
Exactly.
Hey, by the way, did anyone notice that, yes, so AJ Green had a better game for sure, but there were a lot of drops yesterday. Like right on target. Hit you in the chest, drops. Did anyone notice that but me?
Yeah, Mike Thomas dropped some easies. And T. Higgins, he referenced that in his post-game presser. He said, we were kind of, telling him about how good of a game that he had. And he was like, yeah, but I still feel like I left a lot of plays out there, plays that I should make. And, it was true. He did have some drops that could have helped the team win yesterday. But I don't know.
Well, this is not necessarily indicative of how many drops there were, but there were 25 catches on 39 thrown balls by Burrow. So there's the numbers if you want something to go on with the numbers.
Yeah.
Here's 25 for 39.
Yeah, I think the problem is, and this kind of gets back to what Tanya was talking about. So last year, I don't think anybody expected the Bengals to be good at all, and they weren't. They came out and looked almost more awful than maybe we thought that they would be. And then this year, I think the problem is they got some free agents. They got the number one pick in the draft. Everybody talks about how much Joe Burrow doesn't look like a rookie and, all that. He's been playing pretty well, with the exception of last week. He's been playing really well. He played pretty well on Sunday as well. But I think what happened is the excitement of the excitement of building on, what happened last year kind of raised the expectation level of the fan base. And maybe I was talking to Ben Baby from ESPN yesterday, and maybe fans are being a little bit more irrational than they would be because maybe they expect the team to be better than they are. And so when when Burrow makes a rookie mistake, looking like Andy Dalton, as Tanya said, to pretty much game them yesterday, it was just like a gut punch because you're not expecting Joe Burrow to do that because he can do no wrong, right? But, oh, yeah, he's still a rookie. And like you mentioned, Caleb, he's pretty much just past a normal preseason for a rookie.
Okay, now, Reggie, I wanted to bring this up. I've been wanting to bring this up the last few days, but I have not seen near as many calf tweets from you over the last week or so. I mean, it was becoming a weekly thing. Like I couldn't wait to see what kind of clever way Reggie Wilson was going to craft a Randy Bullock calf joke into a tweet. But he had been kicking the ball a lot better over the last few weeks. I even on Twitter yesterday took his name, Bullock, and replaced the two L's with the emoji of like the hands going up in the air. Because I was like, man, this guy's become automatic for the Bengals. And then it comes around Sunday to his second most important kick of the season so far, and doink.
Reggie,
We'll leave the floor open to you.
So it's funny because every time, he makes a kick, I'm like, Randy Bullock, calf power, or, he put his calf into it, or, just, something. And it's funny because it was like, all right, well, the joke is not really all that funny anymore because he's making all of his kicks. And also, in between the time that he missed the potential game-tying field goal in week 1, has become the most accurate kicker in Bengals history. And it's just like, oh, okay, well, maybe, you can't really, poke fun at him anymore because the dude is actually the real deal. But I think something that your tweet alluded to, Mr. No, he seems to miss the kicks that matter the most. And when you do that, there was no excuse. He didn't say his calf, grabbed up on him again, left or right, still to be determined.
My calf, and I said this on Twitter, my calf grabbed up watching that kick.
I just got a cortisone shot in my hip, and my hip was like, oh, when he did that. Ow, dude.
Of course he missed the kick, right? Like it just had to happen. Like we have been really just like, okay, we got to lay off Randy, man, because he's so accurate. He's Mr. Automatic. And then doink. Like seriously, like out of all the things that could go wrong yesterday, that one just seemed to
and of course it hit off the upright, right? Of course it hit off the upright. Because and the worst part about that is I can tell you from from kicking field goals a lot in the past that like if it hits off the upright, that was not necessarily a bad kick. It just didn't go down the middle and it hit off, it's not like he shanked it. Like the one that where his calf grabbed up earlier this season, he shanked that. But when it hits off the upright, that was really not even a bad kick. But of course it hit off the upright, right?
It's just when it's not going your way, like when it rains, it pours. That was like the manifestation of that phrase. When it rains, it pours.
I think the soundtrack card for yesterday's game was doink. Reggie's doink. That was it.
Well, let's get it one more time, Reg.
Doink.
And then Tanya, before this podcast is over, I want another chub or whatever it was.
I cannot let you repeat that. It sounds horrible. No chub.
It was so hard to watch that yesterday because again, I mean, that was the most important kick that Bullock has attempted since the calf kick or whatever you want to call it. That kick would have put the Bengals within 1 point late in the game, and then it depending on how everything.
Then they wouldn't have had to throw an interception for a touchdown?
They would not have, yeah, right. They would not have had to be as aggressive in that final drive. They could have played for field position and field goal range, kick the field goal to potentially win the game.
Funny how that works, huh?
It just felt so Cincinnati, man. And I actually honestly hate that term. If I'm being really honest, I hate the term like that's such a Cincinnati way to lose the game.
Such a Bengal way.
Bengal way but that was such a Bengals way to lose that game.
So Caleb, I brought up on Twitter yesterday, and I think where I get trumped is the high level of the game. But it's like, I think Atlanta and Cincinnati, if they were like in an argument and they wanted to argue like how terrible their teams are compared to the other, I think they might play to a tie. I feel like because they've had some brutal losses, and I think where maybe Atlanta might trump Cincinnati is
they'd have the argument won, but then they'd find a way to lose it at the very end.
There you go.
See, I thought it was just me. Every team that I love goes to pot.
So let me ask you. So we talked a little earlier about the conservative approach to the Bengals later on in the game, and really not even later on in the game, maybe even as early as late second quarter, but specifically in the second half. But I want to ask you, Reggie. I want to get your thoughts on this. Was it the offense that was more conservative? That was the more conservative side for the Bengals, or was it the defense? And I'll tell you. For me specifically, and you don't have to agree with me on this, by all means disagree, but I think the defense was maybe more conservative and early on because I think it was 3 straight drives to start the game. And correct me if I'm wrong, it was at least 2, maybe 3 straight drives to start the game that the Colts were 3 and out.
Yeah.
And then after that, it just seemed like Phillip Rivers started picking apart Cincinnati's defense. And I'm like, wait a minute, this looks like a totally different game that I'm watching here.
Chopping them up, man. And I would agree with you there. I think I have 2 sides to that, but on your point, dude, they were not aggressive at all on defense. Phillip Rivers didn't get sacked once. Like, it was great to see Jesse Bates, with that beautiful interception. I think he's going to be a Pro Bowl player this year. Pay the guy all the money he wants when it's time for him to come up. But there was no pressure on Phillip Rivers. He literally sat back there and picked those guys apart. He had all the time to throw in the world. And it was kind of jarring because it's like, look, if I'm a Bengals fan, I'm okay with maybe a guy getting beat over the top because you blitzed the corner trying to get Phillip Rivers. Or, you brought the house and it's cover 0, but you're just trying to get some pressure on him, because I think even just the idea of him having pressure on him, maybe kind of, because when you pressure Phillip Rivers, he will make some mistakes. And having knowledge of that, you would think that maybe he would pressure them a little bit. And I think after the game, one of the guys asked Zach Taylor about Anarumo, like, how are you feeling about him and his approach? And Zach's like, no, I think he did a great job. I think he's doing great. And I think that probably would just make most fans, most Tanya O'Rourke's just super, super upset, because he literally got super – I don't know what coverage they were playing. I think they dropped back into a lot of zone. But, like, good Lord, like, it was a lot of Phillip just being like, oh, that guy's, open. Oh, that guy's going to make a play. Let me throw it to him. And everything was working. And
even late in the second quarter, it felt like the Bengals were almost in it felt like it was like a late fourth quarter drive for the Chargers, where the Bengals were back, getting back deep in coverage and saying, you can beat us underneath, but you're not going to beat us over the top. And it's like, and I had to really look at the scoreboard at the time and be like, is it the second quarter?
Yeah, they weren't aggressive. They weren't aggressive at all. And I think my other point, and I'll give the floor to Tanya, but the offense also got super conservative. I don't know if you remember, Caleb, there was a drive where they needed 1 yard. And really, the Bengals didn't necessarily have much problems moving the ball yesterday. And all of a sudden, he brings in Samaje Perine as a fullback, and he gives the ball to the up back, and he gets stuffed. And I don't recall at all this season seeing them play with the fullback or seeing them hand to the up back to get a yard at all this season. And we asked Zach about that after the game, and he was like, yeah, I just really like that call there. I really thought that he would give us a chance to get a first down there. He just stuck behind the call. He just said that it just didn't work. And it's just like, dude, seriously? Or I think sometimes too, when Zach is in it, I guess, so he's really in his head, he gets a little too cute as well. Just line up, run it at him. It was working, but all of a sudden you see him fake the up back and then pitch it to Mixon, and all of a sudden Mixon's tackled 3-4 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and you're just like, yo, can we stop trying to?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I will never understand bringing someone cold off the bench to try to basically hammer in a less than 1 yard. I don't understand that in any way, shape, or form. And I don't know anything. But I'm sitting here listening to you guys talk about how the defense played very too conservatively. And I think especially at the end of the game, the last big drive defensively, yeah, they laid off of them too much. They were in that prevent mode, which I get, but I hate that stuff so much. But I'm telling you, but for the defense making those turnovers in that game, they're not even up 21. at the front end of the game, at the first quarter. So without the defense was at least playing, at least from that perspective, they were trying to get the turnover. And I love seeing that. I love seeing a defense try to do that. As a fan, I think there's nothing better than going, he got it. It's one of the greatest things. And so I think they were conservative on both sides of the ball inappropriately at different times. And I agree with you 100% on that one call, Reggie. I watched that. I was screaming my face off. Like, why? Why wouldn't you just quarterback sneak it if you need to, but why? I don't know. I've never understood that. I don't understand that play. I don't get it. And someone who's played football, please explain it to me why you think that's effective, because I've never seen it do well.
Reggie, I got an off-the-wall question for you here real quick as we start to wrap this thing up. There was a point brought up on the broadcast yesterday. They were talking about Phillip Rivers' career, both in San Diego and now in Indianapolis. And there was the question posed of, will he be a Hall of Famer? My question to you is, 20 years from now, when we look at Hall of Famers, is Phillip Rivers one?
Is Phillip Rivers a Hall of Famer?
Is Phillip Rivers a Hall of Famer? It's a tricky question, I think, because there have been times in the past where he has set the league on fire, stats wise, thrown for a bunch of yards and a bunch of touchdowns, but he's 4-4 in the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's like the reciprocal of Eli Manning, where like Eli Manning did not always set the league on fire, but he did win 2 Super Bowls. So is Phillip Rivers a Hall of Famer?
I think
let me ask it to you in this way. Did the Bengals get beat by a Hall of Famer yesterday?
Yeah, Jesse Bates called him one. And I think so. Dan Fouts is a Hall of Famer. And I think Phillip Rivers has statistically either matched or passed him in several categories in San Diego Chargers history books. And I think by virtue of his stats, Phillip is bald. But I think over the last maybe 4 or 5 years, like the knock on Phillip is he's always driving to try to win a game in the fourth quarter, and he throws that interception like Joe did yesterday that ices the game. And I feel like the Chargers lose in the fourth quarter on the last drive like all the time. And I think yesterday the defense could have challenged him more to be put in that situation, because last week against the Browns, he literally did some of those same things. He doesn't have the hardware like Eli does, but I think based on sheer numbers alone, he probably gets in.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to our podcast again this week. It is the Bengals and the Browns this coming Sunday. It's round 2 of that rivalry, and this time it will be here in Cincinnati with fans again at the stadium. Looking forward to that, and looking forward to seeing if the Bengals can get the best of them at home and maybe get this season back on the right track. I want to say sorry to Tanya O'Rourke for stealing your soul like we apparently do every week on this podcast.
No, you don't steal it. The Bengals do.
Well, hopefully we won't have to steal it again next week. Thank you all for listening, and we'll be back next week to break down the Bengals-Browns game. Hopefully a Bengals win. Until then, Hoo Day.
Hoo Day.